Well, welcome. Oklahoma Native Plant Society is very excited to have a continuation of our ongoing monthly virtual lecture series. This month, we're honored to have Kevin Mink, an urban soil health specialist from the Oklahoma County Conservation District. Kevin graduated from Vanderbilt University back in 2014 with a degree in biology, and he's focused on ecology. He joined the team at Trees Atlanta, an environmental nonprofit, and then spent 4 years working in a forest restoration program. He joined the team at the Oklahoma County Conservation District in 2019, and since then has been promoting the use of native wildflowers to create prairie-style gardens that provide habitat for our endangered pollinators. He's also a master's student in landscape architecture at the University of Oklahoma, expecting to graduate next year. I think in no small part to Kevin's commitment, the Oklahoma County Conservation District, and hopefully Kevin will tell us if it's being rolled out to others and possibly even for a statewide rollout, has introduced a yard by yard program, and he's going to tell you all about it. For those of you that are joining us that are new to this program, this is for the Oklahoma Native Plant Society, but also anyone that has an interest in the type of programming that we offer. It's offered for the general public. We've had a pretty big reach out from the conservation districts, as well as the Okies for Monarchs, Facebook, and several other organizations have promoted this. So I don't know who's going to be watching us tonight. If you're new to this or you're not part of the Oklahoma Native Plant Society but are joining us this evening, there is a way as you've logged in to put your name and ask questions, which will be answered at the end of the program, or just leave us a comment. If you're traveling to us from a long distance or out of state, let us know that you're out there and we'll be happy to share that. So without further ado, Kevin, I'll let you take it from here.
Well, thank you so much there, Dr. Bell. Really appreciate the introduction. And hello, everybody. I'm assuming you're out there in cyberspace somewhere, so we will just move right along here. I'm very excited to talk to you about the Yard by Yard Community Resiliency Project. First, a little bit about myself. Dr. Bell already gave a good introduction, but I like this photo on the left here. I like to think about myself as a fire starter. Wherever I go, I try and churn things up, stir up the pot, and I think I've done that pretty well here in Oklahoma. I work for the Oklahoma County Conservation District, which is part of the USDA. The conservation districts were actually born out of the Dust Bowl. And I kind of am split between working with the Natural Resource Conservation Service, which is at the federal level, and the State Conservation Commission, which is at the state level, obviously. And then we have lots of other partners, the Soil Health Team and Oklahoma Association of Conservation Districts, plus the Blue Thumb Team, all who have helped us get this project off the ground. So wearing a lot of hats, doing a lot to try and make conservation happen on the ground. Little bit about the Oklahoma County Conservation District. Our mission is to educate, empower, and assist the citizens of Oklahoma County in protecting, managing, and conserving our renewable resources, promoting healthy clean water and healthy soils for a sustainable environment. So how do we do this? Typically, we host soil health workshops. We have native plant identification sessions and installations. We go to schools and do natural resource days. We take schools out and teach them about fishing and about fisheries management and wildlife. And sometimes we get lucky and we get grants to build high tunnels and greenhouses. But what do you notice about all of these pictures? There's a whole bunch of people in them. Last year, coronavirus really threw us a curveball, and just about all of our programming went out the window. And so the big question was, well, how are we going to keep educating people about conservation and conservation at home, especially because people like myself found themselves working from home, not going out and trying to find an outlet into nature, into being more sustainable. And so they worked in their yards. And, you know, I started out just like, all right, I can't do my workshops. I'm going to do some webisodes. I already compost at home. I bet you there's people out there who are interested in composting and what's going on. So, you know, I started videoing myself doing these compost episodes, talking about what was going on in my compost. And then it just kind of evolved from there because I was like, man, I bet other people out there are trying to do the same things that I am, and trying to make a difference in these kind of main facets here that we're looking at. Native plant diversity, local water quality, local food production, I think is gaining a ton of ground here in Oklahoma, especially in Oklahoma City. Reducing pesticide use and fertilizer. We know, regardless of your feeling about human toxicity, that there are downstream effects of these things. Water usage, the list clearly goes on. So how do we even begin to tackle these myriad of challenges in an urban environment, right? It's super, super difficult. So we reached out to all of the usual suspects in conservation. Forestry, we reached out to the city. We talked to OSU's extension office. We worked with our partners at the Conservation Commission and the water conservation coordinator with the city. And we said, hey, what in your mind can an urban person do to promote conservation? You know, just give us a list. Give us a couple suggestions of what you think people can do. And so we started to develop this checklist. And if you can't read it, don't worry about it. We're gonna go through it in pretty good detail here. So we started to develop this checklist of practices that people regularly do in an urban setting that we know have an impact for conservation purposes. So we developed this checklist. All the blue lines you see there are resources. I thought the most important thing to make this successful is that people need to know how to do this and they need to have access to some sort of a resource. Okay, if I want to start composting, how do I do that? It's right there on the checklist for you to look at. And so the checklist was then broken into categories, which we'll go over in a second here. The biggest thing that we kind of collectively agreed on, and is maybe the most controversial part of this, which is why it's, you know, a big piece right here in the front, is maintaining a pesticide-free yard. You know, as I mentioned, we know that the jury's still out on human toxicity, but we know that there are cumulative impacts of pesticides downstream on local fish populations. We know that the over application of fertilizer leads to the eutrophication of our lakes and our streams. So we wanted to make a pretty big stand here, you know, to say this, it can't be part of the program. If we're going to usher in this new kind of conservation mindset, we need to move away from these things. And the big goal is that, you know, we're not trying to exclude people from the program. This is an educational program to get people to this better place. So the first category, Soil, and this kind of runs the gamut of making soil and conserving soil. So using mulch, simply non-dyed local mulch, cedar mulch, really goes a long way to increasing organic matter in the soil, retaining moisture, composting, obvious benefit to the environment. You're probably recycling food waste and yard waste that would otherwise end up in the landfill. Mulch mowing instead of bagging lawn clippings. Like, people don't even think about that. Just recycling that nutrient back into the soil has a huge impact on the health of your lawn. And then compost, adding the compost back into the soil, increasing mowing height. We know these have very important impacts to our soil health. So some of the pictures we're looking at here are submissions. These are people who are participants in the Yard by Yard program. They're showcasing in your left there, that's somebody's home composting system. Somebody on the right there showing us that they've increased their mower height to 3 inches, which is great. I mean, some people complain like, why isn't your lawn a ½ inch tall? But I bet you this person has a much cooler, nicer, more lush, less irrigation heavy lawn than some of their neighbors. First category. Second category is water. And I think this is especially important to think about in Oklahoma, because our water resources are kind of all over the place. We can get a ton of rain, and then, summertime, it's kind of like, what's going on here? What happened to all the water? So planting appropriately, using drought and heat tolerant plants, things that can deal with, the onslaught of rain and deal with, a lack of water. Efficient irrigation equipment, like, that seems kind of silly and like it doesn't fit in this kind of conservation thing. But if you live in Oklahoma City, if you've been around Edmond, there's plenty of times you see those sprinklers running when the rain is falling, or you see the sprinklers running and the water is running off into the street. So it has an impact to cut those things back, or to capture water, like in this rain garden example. So a couple examples here of submissions: those rain barrels collecting and holding rainwater for future watering use. Both the top left and bottom right corner, you're looking at bioswales, where people are channeling their water, slowing it down with those rock basins, and encouraging the water to go into the ground instead of into the storm drain so quickly and whisked off site. So they're using the water as opposed to sending it away, which is our traditional approach. Food, which is a big one and a difficult one, I think, because Oklahoma is a challenging growing environment. I know that all too well myself. But I think it's really, really important, especially as you'll see some of the yards we certified a little later on, is how do we integrate food into our urban settings? And sometimes it's a basil plant, on our patio. But that is good, because then you are getting your own basil, right? You're maintaining that plant yourself instead of buying a bunch at the grocery store and then using a couple leaves and the rest end up in the trash, or hopefully in your compost. And then slow food. Fruit producing trees. We have native fruit producing trees that have value to wildlife and also to humans, that are not really integrated into our urban landscape. And going a step further, this is hard for some people in urban settings, but thinking about goats and chickens, there are definitely people I know in war acres that have have urban chickens running around, which is awesome. They give eggs to their neighbors and their housemates and their friends, because that's what you do when you have chickens. And honeybee hive production. I'm hoping this year, maybe somebody listening tonight, if you're out there, we want to get some honeybee hive people in this program and teach more people about, honeybee hive production. And then our last category, which I'm talking to the native plant people. So this is your bread and butter here is habitat, urban wildlife habitat. And some of you may even recognize a picture in the top right corner of Dr. Bell's yard right there. I mean, it's really important that we move and think beyond, the mow, blow, and go attitude, we've kind of had with the landscape, because we get all these tremendous benefits, the pops of color, the interesting wildlife showing up, the variety of butterflies and insects, and the health that you can see. I mean, just those pictures, I don't have a side-by-side, maybe I should, but those pictures are far more enriching than your typical lawn setting that you see in Nichols Hills. I apologize if that's somebody out there, but that's just a neighborhood I see a lot of that. So talking about using well-adapted plants, this fits in with our water category. Native plants, especially host plants. I mean, a big component of this is being cognizant of what we're planting, not just, oh, it's native for the sake of being native, but does the wildflower I'm planting, like milkweed, provide not only pollen and nectar, but actual living quarters? Where is that insect going to grow up? Host plants are incredibly important and often overlooked. And then thinking of other, birdhouses certainly are common, but expanding that to mason bee hotels and bat boxes, and integrating these into our home landscape, so that nature is right there in your backyard. So these past 4 slides that we've looked at, all those photos are submissions from people. Each of these bullet points is a category on this checklist that I'm showing you here. And it's really that simple. I mean, we wanted this concept to cover a variety of topics, because no one person is going to solve this urban conservation environmental problem, right? Like I simply don't have enough yard to give up to nature to make the kind of impact that will be more powerful across communities, across the state. So that's where the yard by yard idea came from, is no one person can do this. We all have to come together and do it incrementally to make a profound difference. So what I'm going to show you here is my personal favorite part of this program is we encourage people to submit a video. Like the checklist, yeah, okay, it's cool. It has good resources, but like we want to hear from people. So this is a submission we received last summer.
So this is the front of my house.
Ooh. Sorry.
I have a flower bed out here that also has herbs in it: horseradish, parsley, oregano, thyme. On the south side of my house, I have 2 rain barrels that are married together. You can see those right there. And then going around the front of my house, I have a new herb bed: rosemary, thyme, sage, 2 kinds of basil, bee balm. Then I have eggplant. I use a reel mower, so I mulch, and then I have quit planting grass and have clover planted instead. And then heading over to the north side of my house, I have one rain barrel on the front. And we're gonna go into the backyard, and there will be 4 dogs. I have several raised beds out here. 2 more rain barrels here on the west side of the house. This is one raised bed with different squash, cucumber, long beans. Then I have 3 raised beds that are covered with various vegetables. And then this is an herb bed that's kind of collapsing. Again, I have clover planted and growing out here, trying to replace the grass. All the way around the perimeter of my yard, I have left the leaves. I let the branches stay so I can create habitat. And I do have a mason bee hive up there in the corner. So that's.
That was it. That was, I cut it off there at the end because I don't want to send her name out into the universe without her permission. But I mean, that seems relatively easy, right? I mean, that's a very common scenario. And we don't even really think that yard really may be doing all that much, but she has a lot going on there. She's got herbs in her front yard. She has lots of pollinator habitat. She's collecting rainwater. She's growing food in the backyard. And each of these videos is an avenue for a conversation, right? I had a great conversation with this lady about other ways she could incorporate wildflowers into her site, or other plants she might try, other food opportunities, composting. So it's really a great way to introduce people to the program, and also to show you that it's possible, right? Like, I mean, I can preach all day long, but to me, it's much more interesting to see what else is out there, what other people are doing. So, oh, pardon me, I closed out here when I didn't mean to. So we'll take a look here quickly at one more short one. I had a really fun time meeting these guys.
Hello, Oklahoma Conservation Districts. Wanted to give you a quick tour of our increasingly conservation-friendly backyard. Start here by pointing out the area that we have moved to a crushed granite area to reduce a little bit of the turf grass area of our backyard, including a rock path that leads to our hammock area. Then we have some nice pollinators here and some rust and sage that many pollinating bees are enjoying. And wildflowers here with some salvia. And then moving on back here, we have our vegetable garden. Have some jalapenos and other peppers and our tomato plants. We just finished up our spinach and kale and put in some pumpkins yesterday. And this is our pollinator garden that is starting the very early stages of blooming. And our zucchini and strawberries and cucumbers and peas and carrots are all doing quite well. We also have some herbs of mint and basil. Then some drought-tolerant crepe myrtles that are young but lining our back patio. Some more drought-tolerant plants. Then we come to our little birdhouse village in our Japanese maple tree. Hello.
So there you go. There's another pretty easy one. These guys were great. Little different flavor. They're new, right? They're very, very new to conservation on the home front. which is awesome that they're interested in it. I mean, they were very excited that they were pesticide free. They have a little boy that runs around the yard, so they complain about their neighbors who spray out there. And this was a good opportunity for me to talk with them about other ways they can improve their yard, incorporate some more native plants into the area, talk about their watering regimen. So is this the yard that is going to save the planet? Definitely not. Is it helping? 100%. And there's a lot of great things going on here that we need to be recognizing and rewarding. So that's kind of where follow-up comes in, right? We encourage people to submit the video with the checklist. If they don't want to do a video, they can submit photos. If they don't even want to submit a video or photos, they can just send the checklist in. I'm pretty sure that Dr. Bell was like, I have my checklist, but can you just come out? And that's what we did. I came out and we went through the checklist together to do the certification. So it's, very simple process. We walk through everything, talk about it with people, they ask questions, and then there's usually well, what's next? What do we get to do next? And that's great. That's the best part is we just started this last year. We launched, let's see, is that on my next slide? No, we're still on follow-up here. So when we follow up, everybody gets a yard sign. We provide some new native wildflower seed. Many of you are probably familiar with Johnston's Good as Gold mix, which we work with. We work with them, and we're working with them to develop a new mix specifically for this program. Some stickers, because you got to get the branding out there. If we're going to get every yard in Oklahoma into this, got to get the promotional stickers. And then my personal favorite is moving into outreach, which is a huge component of this, is we want the participants to become advocates, to get your neighbors involved, to reach out to your local representation, which is what we do. We've developed these postcards for your local representatives. Every yard we've certified, they have sent, this note to their city council person, their state senator, and their House representative. And we've had some good responses. I wouldn't say we always hear back, but we have gotten some good responses. And representatives are interested in following this program and advocating for us if they can, which is really wonderful. And then of course your neighbors, right? It's got to start at home on some level. So who are our neighbors? Who lives in our community that I guess there's two schools of thought. Who needs a push off the edge? And who's already doing it and just needs to be brought into the community of people that we're building here. And I think this is the most exciting thing, is the programming that comes out of that. And to me, this is where we do achieve, we achieve a greater level of education for people. We did this when I first went out to Dr. Bell's house just to do his certification. I was struck by all of the cool things going on out there. And then when I came back, I was like, we got to do a little thing about your outdoor monarch habitats. How many people are out there raising monarchs outside in a controlled environment with this kind of success? It's just, it's kind of a rare thing. And Dr. Bell has its own little system set up. So that was an awesome opportunity for us to, showcase what he's doing and put it out there into the world so that more people can be like, oh man, like I should do that. I can do that because look, he's doing it. You know, and then all sorts of other cool things. You know, we've started doing Wildflower Wednesday posts between Okies for Monarchs and Oklahoma County Conservation District, because I was spending the summer visiting with folks, and just all kinds of beautiful things in bloom. There's a persimmon tree that was in bloom. I believe this bloom mist flower. That, I don't know, that could be yours, Dr. Bell, but I know there were a couple houses I visited that had that in bloom. And then another one from our district office here. So lots of opportunities that just naturally flow out of this to share with people, you know, to keep the education going. So that kind of wraps up my overview of the yard by yard program. You know, we've talked through how it was created here in the midst of a global pandemic, and how you can apply, right? The checklist, very easy to work through, lots of resources there. You may even be ready to just do it. You know, go out and take the video, send it to us. Or if you don't want a video or photos, still send it to us. You know, we're happy to follow up with you. But we have more directions to go in. You know, like what happens with code enforcement? You know, I know a couple of my yards, people were complaining about, you know, their neighbors calling code enforcement on them. So how are we going to address that issue? Maybe this is a catalyst for local change. I mentioned we have gotten good response from local representation. So I think there's an avenue there, but you know, we need the voices to make that happen. I'm sure some of you out there have, you know, we're following along with the checklist and are like, well, shouldn't this be in here, or shouldn't that be in there, or you're totally forgetting about this, or great, please tell us. We want to know. We want to add categories. We want to make categories better. We want to argue with you about categories if there's things that you have a problem with, because that's the only way, you know, we're going to make a little progress, is if we argue about it a little bit, and that'll make the program better. And then there's this problem of pesticides, right? Thus far, we have been fortunate in our participants in that they are wholly against using pesticides, you know, either for a wildlife standpoint, a water standpoint, a human health standpoint. But I myself recognize that if I am attempting to remove something like my lawn of Bermuda grass, and I mean actually remove it, maybe I need to be doing that. Or maybe I live in a more rural part of the state and I need to be, you know, I need to consider this differently because my agricultural land doesn't, you know, shouldn't apply to the yard program. You know, we have not addressed that yet because we haven't encountered it yet, to be honest. You know, and that's again something that we need the help of participants to figure out and share the info, so that this can continue to grow. And then the big question, which actually I'm going to answer on the next slide, is can the program be adopted to state and national level? So this is exciting, new for 2021, 6 new conservation districts, in addition to Oklahoma County and Tulsa County, are adopting the program. We initially thought we would try and take the program statewide, which we want to do, obviously. Funding is an obstacle. So we basically sent a call out for applications and said, let's start with the counties that we know there's interest in, you know, and these are the counties that kind of jumped in on the program. If you're watching this and your county is not listed and you want to be a part of the yard by yard program, reach out to us, whether it's myself personally, if it's to your local conservation district. I'd recommend me personally because I'm the program guy, but it is good to, introduce yourself to your local conservation district, because they are the people who will administer this program in your local area. And then I'm personally super excited that we got a bonus this year. One of our districts out in Washington State contacted us about adopting the program there, which is super cool. They loved the checklist. We've talked about adapting the resources for, for their eco-region. Obviously, they're not going to be planting the same things in the Pacific Northwest as we're planting here. So that's exciting. There's obviously interest in this kind of comprehensive yard certification program that's looking at more than habitat, more than food. It's a little bit of everything. And then the last thing I want to say is there are lots of opportunities for research for you academics out there. We want to get to the community level of intervention so that we can start to see those downstream impacts. If we get entire communities enrolled in this program, we may see changes in the water quality to a particular watershed. We'll definitely see changes in the local soil health. Not to mention extensions to wildlife and plant life. All of those things are within the realm of possibility. And we're also looking to partner, right? We have had a couple local governments, the Association of Central Oklahoma Governments, reached out to us about, is this something that we can promote in some of our neighborhoods? So there's some cool momentum going on here. We're really excited moving into the spring. I think that is my last slide. Thank you all so much for joining. I'm really excited that I was able to share this program with you. On the right side of the screen there, you will find all of my contact information. Please reach out to me. I'm happy to talk about this more. There's also 2 great websites there, the okconservation.org/yard-by-yard that has a checklist on it that has all of your resources, plus a link to our YouTube channel where a lot of videos are posted that are useful. You'll find a lot of them are me talking about plants and planting plants, but that's okay. That's the goal. And of course, check us out on Facebook. We have some cool new media that will be released in anticipation of the spring launch. So there's going to be more exciting things coming this spring. Thank you.
Kevin, thank you very much for that. Adam, there may be an opportunity at this point, if there are participants that are viewing this, if you have a question or a comment that you would like to address to Kevin or to the Native Plant Society, type it in and we'll take a few minutes to deal with those if there's anything. In the interim, while we're waiting on those comments to come in, I would mention for those that may be new to this, there's a Bible, if you will, that is called Bringing Nature Home by Douglas Tallamy, who probably wrote the first comprehensive book on this is what you ought to do and this is how you can do it. And if you've not read it or you've not heard about it, I would strongly encourage you to look into that. A couple of other websites, there's for Oklahoma, if you'll Google or look into Okies for Monarchs, that has an extensive list of links as far as plants to plant, how to do it, and other resources. Another one is Monarch Watch. Again, has really good information on how to plant and maintain a pollinator-friendly backyard. One other comment I was asked by a couple of people of the leadership of the ONPS, if you haven't paid your dues, now is the time to do it. All right. Adam, do you have any comments that you want to address?
We do. We have a couple of questions from Deborah. Early on in the presentation, I think you talked about discouraging the use of pesticides. She wants to know, does this also include organic pesticides?
Oh yeah, that is a really great question. And you know, I will say that we have definitely not developed a comprehensive, like, where we draw the line in the sand with any of these things. But organic pesticides, I mean, if you're using citric acid or something like that, that's completely acceptable, you know. And typically we find that people who are using organic pesticides are not trying to use them in the long run, right? And that's the ultimate goal, is to not use it in the long run, right? If you have a problem plant that you're trying to get rid of and you get rid of it, great. We just, you know, we don't want people out there blanket spraying their yard year after year the way we've kind of become accustomed to.
All right. It looks like Lewis asked, can Bermuda grass actually grow to 3 inches tall? Or 3 feet tall? Maybe it's 3 inches, but
Bermuda grass will grow much taller if you just let it grow. I mean, you'd be shocked at the amount of pasture land in Oklahoma that is almost strictly Bermuda grass.
oh yeah.
And you wouldn't even think it, you know, you'd be like, oh, that's Bermuda grass. But yeah, and that just, I think, is a great example of, you know, how kind of misrepresented our grasses are, right? Like we think that grasses are supposed to be short, but they're not.
Right. Lewis also asked in a follow-up, what kind of clover can be grown? Doesn't it require more water?
So I have found, and this is just because it's in my yard, that Dutch white clover, which is pretty typical. If you don't treat your lawn, you'll probably find it come up. No, I don't. It'll grow. I don't mow it. It'll grow all summer long. It'll flower in the spring. The dog loves it, loves to roll in it. Yeah, it's great. I think the only time that it has a problem is like the late summer when everything is dry and dead anyway. But on top of that, sorry, that's only one type of clover. If you're doing a pollinator garden, I mean, crimson clover is a great cover crop for agricultural use. Purple prairie clover is great in your pollinator garden. It's a nitrogen fixer. But in a lawn setting, probably Dutch white clover is the most common and easy.
All right. We've got a question from Anna, who is listening from Georgia, but I'm sure her heart is in Oklahoma. What is a non-pesticide option for dealing with bagworms?
A non-pest, oh man, I knew there was going to be a question that was difficult for me to answer. A non-pesticide way, I mean, you got to pick them off one by one, I think, right? No, to be honest, I'm not going to pretend that I have an answer to that question.
We have on the list of talks coming up somewhere in the distant future, we'll be talking about prescribed burns. That might work.
Yeah, I mean, I do have some knowledge of various pests, but that is unfortunately not one of them.
Actually, there was a follow-up to that question in the chat, in the live chat, and Holly Hunter had mentioned that maybe piercing the webs would encourage birds to get into it. So it's possible.
Holly is a certified yard participant, so she would know.
No.
And actually, for those that are, again, going back to the Talamy book, Bringing Nature Home, if you read it, you'll find that the bagworms are oftentimes the preferred source for migrating warblers, as well as tanagers in the late summer. So as human beings, if we can bear the unsightliness of it, there's actually, in the greater good, they probably offer something.
Yeah.
That actually is a great point, Dr. Bell, that I don't know that I even touched on in regards to our landscaping discussion is, when we're talking about planting the path for pollinators and planting host plants, part of that is recognizing that damage to the plant that we see is a good thing, right? Like typically you're not always going to see a situation. Bagworms probably, it can go either way. But most insects are not going to outstrip their resources, right? So, the fear of, something's going to eat all of my plants, unless it's a deer, I think my mom's probably listening. So unless it's a deer, but yeah, things will feed on plants because that's the goal.
We've got a question from Allie Deaver. She asks, can a common area in a neighborhood apply for yard by yard? Say like our waste station in our neighborhood.
Yeah, absolutely. We want this program to get to the community level. Like we said, the individual yard is great, but we need more than that. And if it starts in a community, in a community garden, in a wildflower area, in a common area, that's great. That's an avenue to the rest of the community. So absolutely.
Great. One more comment here from Deb. She's surprised that Cleveland County is not participating in the program. Who was contacted, or who do you contact in kind of each county asking for participation?
It sounds like Deb and I should probably chat. I personally would love to get it into Cleveland County because Norman is there. But it was just based on, we sent out the application to all of the conservation districts. And we basically went with the people who applied, who sent it back to us.
All right, so Deb, if you're listening, get a hold of Kevin.
Yeah, Deb, let's talk. Let's make it happen.
Got a question from Kimberly Klein. She lives in Edmond and would love to keep bees. However, she's concerned about the use of pesticides by her neighbors. A lot of people in her neighborhood spray for mosquitoes and other things. Will that harm bees?
Yeah, so that's a very good question. And I believe that the answer is yes. I mean, I don't have hard research in my hands to say yes, but I would say, what's the term, anecdotally, from people I have interacted with who have bees, yes, like a pesticide, specifically an insecticide, while it may target a certain group of species, like they're all they're all microinvertebrates and are going to be damaged by residual pesticide use. If it doesn't kill them, it will disorient them or, otherwise disrupt the natural flow.
Okay, referring to kind of your checklist here, Lily asks, she doesn't have a compost bin yet, but she does donate the food scraps to Commonwealth Urban Farms. Could that be a substitute for on-site composting?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I mean, we work with Commonwealth all the time. They're a really great organization. In fact, a a couple of the people whose land is used, are planning to join the program. Yes, the short answer to that is for sure. The goal is to divert food waste, create healthy soil. So you're doing it.
All right, another question from Holly. She asks, is Yard by Yard a national project as well?
We'll see, is the best answer I have. We received outreach from a conservation district in Washington State, and we've gotten the go-ahead from the National Association of Conservation Districts, way too many long names, to launch it there. So we'll just kind of see what happens. I mean, if they get a good response, if we, we're only in the second year. This launched in Oklahoma County on July 1 last year, Tulsa County August 1. So my hope is that yes, it will go national, but we're still, it's still kind of building momentum.
But the origin of this was, again, an Oklahoma origin, correct?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this was mine and my colleagues at the Conservation Commission, at the Conservation District, being like, what do we do now that we can't educate people about conservation? We don't have the opportunity. And this was like one-on-one, not big groups, still has an impact. Can do it in a global pandemic.
All right, Kevin, I think that's all of them. For those who are viewing, if I missed one of your questions, sorry, but contact Kevin through the contact information there on the screen, and he'll be able to get back to you.
Yes, please.
Yep. Well, thank you all for joining. If you have others that were interested in watching this but were unable to, it will be archived. Logging on or just going to the Oklahoma Native Plants website. This will be archived and available for future viewing. Kevin, again, on behalf of the Oklahoma Native Plant Society, thank you very much for this insightful talk on a very, very appropriate topic.
Thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Okay. And we'll sign off, Adam.